What's up, everyone? This is Jason with A7 Forge, and we're moving on with our GPT on trial series. Hope you guys are hanging out, finding some value, or getting some help somehow. You know, get my stuff fired up here, and we'll move into Aquinas. So, if you've been following along, we did a video on the overall process on how you can use GPT for these trials fights, how to feed them input, how to use that input, working towards a team, the feedback loop, all that, right? Then we did another video where we used that process for a Magnar win. And now we're going to do the same thing for an Aquinas win. So I'll show you real quick how this is done. Let me get rid of my banner. Bruce Banner. But yeah, I'll show you how this is done. I took a video of all of the inputs. Get to it here. So whenever you start to do this yourself, if you do, you're going to want to give GPT all of the mechanics of the fight, the mechanics of the boss, of the ads, of the phases, the constellation info, the entry conditions, all of that, right? Well, who wants to type all that crap, right? And it would be a bunch of screenshots. So what you do is you just use a free, all of the main OS systems, Windows, iOS, Linux, Mac, Android, they all have free screen capture capabilities. So as long as your file is under 512 megs, you can upload it to GPT and it will break it down frame by frame. So instead of taking all of those pictures, just do this. So I took a video where I said, okay, here's the boss guide info, here's the boss's abilities, right? I think we looked at immunities, yep. Then we look at the breakdown here, right? Go through each of those. And you take all that and upload it, and then this is the type of breakdown you get, right? So it's giving you its information that basically saying it understands what you're asking for. Here's the best effects for the fight you should consider using. Here's the effects you should avoid. Here's your constellation input info. Here's your recommendations. Now notice it came up with a different recommendation than what we ran with, and that's okay. I had to delete my main project in GPT where I did this originally. And you're always, not always, but you're gonna come up with different answers just depending on how you ask and what the status of your metadata is, stuff like that. It's giving you some artifacts. And here's another team to try, right? And here's another team to try, and here's another team to try, and here's the order you should test them in, and here's some troubleshooting, right? So I did that whole process and came up with this team, right? So for each of these trials fights, sorry, I'm getting something. Yeah, for each of these trial fights, you're going to get free downloads of documents like this, which break the fights down for you. And, it could be of help. And then also a prompt on how to do this yourself, right? So those will be in the description of the video. But this is the team we landed on. Let's go ahead and tune them up. So the way I do gear, right, is like I'm very fluid. I'm always just moving gear from person to person to person. That gets tricky in the trials fights because of how geared you have to keep everyone for the constellation bonuses and stuff. So the process I go through is generally I gear and I use this to be like, no, don't take from Tamarin, don't take from what is that, Wanda, or and once I settle on, what I'm going to use, I'll go back to the constellations for the fight just to make sure I didn't take anything from someone that would affect the constellation for this fight, right? But with Wukong, um, let's see who he's got with him, right? So Wukong, Wendy, Destina, and Vivi. Show he was on lifesteal and health, which is actually kind of like a big deal for him because of his frontline status. So if we put him on lifestyle and health, then give him some health, lifesteal, not lifestyle, some defense. That helps him out a little bit. But what if we do it this way? That's even more better, right? He's on POV. So, Destina, our Destiny, she needs herself. So what, she was on defense and health and immunity, so let's find her an immunity piece there. How about she choose from what we want? That's number 1. So G. Ross does not need that right now. So she could, we put her on Shimaja. And landing zone. Let's get her dialed in. She's on Bloodstone. That's fine. Because nobody else is in her group from that group. So yeah, she's on Bloodstone, and we have her EE. Then BB. She likes to blow stuff up. So let's get her blowing stuff up. And it should be fine. So that should fix up the crew. And again, like I said, this was a group that was generated based on like my roster and the needs of the encounter, and was built with auto in mind. So next up we'll do Harius. But yeah, some of these fights definitely end up being much more manual required than auto possible. Now, as your account matures and you get more and more constellations filled out, the easier some of these fights to become. But also, like, the higher difficulties just require that. So, it's just all part of progression. Like I said, we're doing hell mode for every element, and then later on in the month we'll move on to nightmare mode and see what we can do there. So, let's take a look at some of the stuff it was saying, right? If Aquinas reaches 100% too often, so yeah, attack more, right? If there's some waves, keeps ruining turn order. Work on your immunity. Too slow, so... And that's the type of stuff that you find in the FAQ document, right? Run follows report after opening turns. Use the 4-turn prep window to establish buffs immunity staying in your damage engine before Aquana begins the real fight. Well, she looks so happy there, like, I'm about to wreck your shit. Is kind of how she looked. Let's see where he fights at. Well, let's see if we beat the timer, because we have to take her down before this 2 gets to a 0. And now, I'm surprised that didn't come down. Wukong's a fun character if you don't have him. He's super, super survivable because he gives himself a barrier. Crackathon, you get him, Landy. Alright, so that was second to last. And again, I know I could click the big glowing Orky button down there, but we are trying to do this on auto. And looks like we got there. So that would be how you would do Aquinas, right? As a reminder, I like to look for stuff on air, but as a reminder, I gave it an input video. Literally, this was all the information that I gave it, right? What's that, like a little over a minute worth of a screen grab, right? And we grab all the information, we fed it in, and it broke down the fight in a very meaningful way for us. It gave us a lot of good advice. We built a group, and we are succeeded. Good job, y'all. Well, that's Aquinas. We are moving on to the next element after this one, and here's where it starts to get a little trickier, but we shall overcome. We have beaten every element in Hell Mode using this process, and I think you can as well. So I hope you're getting some value out of this, and as always, at Ease7Forge on Discord. Hit me up anytime. Drop me those follows, give me those likes.